Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Explore Spiritism program on Kardec Radio. In this program, I share teachings, resources, and reflections to help you along your way in your exploration of Spiritism. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Spiritist vision and practice of mediumship, but specifically to address common misconceptions and doubts. So the first reaction that people sometimes have to the idea of or terms Spiritism and mediumship, if not outright disbelief, may be to feel a bit leery or cautious or suspicious. But of course, it depends on the individual's background and the context or source for this kind of reference. And they may also have their own preconceived notions. But for those whose background does not include the exposure to or the contemplation of concepts the way we understand them, through Spiritism as codified by Allan Kardec, and by the way, when I use the term Spiritism, I'm always referring to it in that context, unless specifically stated. But when someone does not have that kind of background, then understandably so, there's easily room for a number of misunderstandings. And that's true in several aspects, including mediumship. So tonight I would like to make some very important clarifications. But tonight is not about the mechanics of mediumship and how it works, but rather about addressing these erroneous ideas that people who've not previously studied or researched Spiritism before may have when it comes to what Spiritists do in terms of their communication with spirits. And to begin, I'd like to say that neither spirits themselves nor mediumship, meaning the communication with spirits, represent a singular or end-all focus of Spiritism. We don't define Spiritism either as a belief in spirits or a belief in the ability to communicate with spirits. End of story, or with some variation under that umbrella. More than a belief in those things, it's actually involving the experimental science of observing them and the practical application of them as well. Spiritism, again, as codified by Allan Kardec, began with the study of spirit phenomena, and then the discovery of an engagement in communicating with the spirits in an intelligent way. This was followed by the systematic collection of answers and information by way of those communications, and ultimately their organization, or what we call codification, into a body of knowledge or doctrine. But this evidence-based information, both from and about spirits, reveals so much about life, past, present, and future, that it is of great value to us in terms of its applicability to how we live, our perspectives, our responses to life's occurrences, big and small, our choices, our behaviors, etc. And quite frankly, it is so revealing in this way because we're all spirits ourselves. So everything we learn applies just as much to us as it does to the spirits not presently incarnated. In other words, the ones, quote unquote, on the other side, who we refer to as being able to communicate with when we talk about mediumship. So Spiritism and mediumship encompass so much more than just the ability to communicate with spirits or the act of actually doing so. It involves an ongoing study of what we learn through mediumship, as well as the effort to put the consequential lessons into practice for our benefit and for the benefit of others, and to get more out of life, both now and in the future. Furthermore, the exercise of communicating with spirits in Spiritism is always for the practical and benevolent purposes, like we will discuss tonight. Now, let's get into some more specifics and address some common doubts and misconceptions. So the first thing that I want to talk about tonight is that Spiritism will not make you a medium. So what do I mean by that? Well, the Spiritist resources concerning mediumship offer a wealth of very important knowledge, but they're not like a step-by-step instruction manual on how to become a medium. To study mediumship through Spiritism is to learn about numerous aspects of spiritual influence, generally speaking, and more specifically what mediumship is, how it works, and how to practice it responsibly. And this is something that anyone and everyone can and should study. But although we are all mediums in the sense that we all experience some degree of influence from spirits, such as the suggestions of thought received through intuition, not everyone in this lifetime can register the spirit's influence with the degree of sensitivity found in those having an ostensive or expressive form of this mediumistic faculty. Those who do will find at the Spiritist Center mediumistic education, including concepts that I've just mentioned, as well as support for developing their faculty and the opportunity to be of service, which takes me to my next area of focus, and that is the practice of mediumship. So this is part of an image that I had created for a post on the Explore Spiritism page on Facebook to help dispel misconceptions, because in Spiritism we don't use Ouija boards, tarot cards, crystal balls, candles, charms, or the like. For some of them, we don't have much faith in their utility, but in any case, and just as importantly, we understand how to communicate with spirits and to benefit from our natural relationship with the spirit world in a much more effective and efficient way. In a book by Spiritist author Martins Peralva, the title of which would translate to Studying Mediumship, he outlines 3 principal objectives for incarnate workers in the Spiritist practice of mediumship. The first one is the cooperation between incarnate and discarnate beings in the service of bringing comfort to the suffering and enlightenment to the ignorant. The second is self-education through the renewal of sentiments, achieved through the application of moral teachings. And the third, the construction of precious ties of affection with the spiritual plane, thereby consolidating the basis of superior cooperation and friendship. To illustrate this a little bit, I put together a few images that are examples of some of the most common ways that you will see different forms of mediumship applied in Spiritism. So the first one here we have on the left is called psychography, and this is a writing form of mediumship through which we've received all kinds of communications that are educational, right? Helping us learn about different spirits and their conditions, their experiences. We also have received communications from loved ones in the spirit realm, and of course, many books received through this form of mediumship. Now here in the middle, you'll see an image depicting a special kind of Spiritist meeting that uses the employment of mediumship. And I want you to look here at this portion of the image, because you'll see here is the medium, right? An incarnate person who has the mediumistic faculty of psychophony. And you see the spirit here behind her, the discarnate spirit, communicating through her. And there's another discarnate being here, kind of working behind the scenes in the spirit realm. This is a mentoring spirit who's helping to facilitate the connection and transmission of information, but also helping to provide some protection for those present, in particular the medium, as she is connected vibrationally with this communicating spirit. Because this kind of mediumistic session is one in which spiritists hold to provide support for suffering spirits. So this spirit here would be a suffering spirit who's coming to get help, or in some cases is brought here to receive help, because here you have another incarnate being who is acting in the role of a counselor, speaking to that spirit to help it, see a different perspective through his own counseling and with the help of other work that takes place within the spiritual realm. These meetings are called sessions for disobsession, also called spirit release therapy, but it is a great example of one of the very noble and charitable ways that mediumship is employed in Spiritism to bring help and support to others. And then over here on the right, we have a practice that you will encounter if you go to a Spiritist center, and this is called passes, which in their essence, the passes are basically a transmission of energy from one being to another. And this helps to generate a restorative balance and a proper energetic flow in the being who is the ultimate recipient. Next up, the next topic that I want to address is whether or not there is a danger in practicing mediumship. Because knowing that spiritists practice the communication with discarnate spirits, and as long as they don't immediately discount that as something unreal or impossible, people can have concerns about a danger in doing so. And of course, images and messages from popular culture have a lot to do with that. So let me offer some food for thought here, with, of course, the Spiritist perspective. Number one, the exchange between two realms is a natural phenomenon of all ages in human history. But, aside from visual images like the one that I had created for Facebook, there's also some terminology that may come to mind for those unfamiliar with Spiritism. And one example is the word occult, right? As in dabbling with the occult. And of course, that word in itself is dressed in all kinds of negative connotations, even though it doesn't have to be. But in reality, the word occult is not a good fit for Spiritism anyway. And to illustrate, I'm going to share a quote from a text on the Spiritist Group of New York website that addresses the question of whether Spiritism is part of the occult. And they clarify, it is true that in the past and still today, those who do not understand Spiritism claim that it is part of the occult. That has always been untrue. By its very nature, Spiritism works to clarify and explain the spirit-related phenomena, spirit evolution, and the divine laws that govern the universe to anyone who wishes to learn. So in no way is it mysterious, hidden, beyond ordinary understanding, or counterintuitive. Number two, communication with the spirit realm does not equate to an open door to evil and destructive forces. An idea like that would never account for the innumerable and consistent messages from spirits that encourage love and benevolence toward others, faith in God, and moral progression. And those are the kinds of messages that we do seek. Now, to be entirely clear, I'm just going to put something out there in case anyone with this kind of doubt comes across this video and perhaps comes from a background, for example, in which they've been told anything to the contrary, and it is the fact that Spiritism involves no kind of demon or spirit worship. I'd like to reference here another text from the Spiritist Group of New York site where on this topic they commented, Spiritism clearly explains that a quote-unquote demon is just a fellow person, now discarnate, so we have a discarnate spirit, right, who has become trapped in the cycle, meaning several incarnations, of violence, cruelty, ignorance, and hate. In no way would such a person be worshipped. Instead, such individuals must be prayed for, so God will help inspire them to seek the path of progress. And as for the related claim that Spiritists worship spirits, again, Spiritism teaches us that there's only one God and that spirits are just our fellow beings who are discarnate. Under such realizations, why would a Spiritist worship a fellow spirit? End quote. And simply put, we do not. In fact, worship in general isn't part of any Spiritist practice anyway. As for interacting with spirits of a lower vibration, if and when Spiritists do intentionally engage in any communication with spirits who are not present to impart valuable knowledge or words of guidance, encouragement, or inspiration, then it is to hear from an unhappy discarnate spirit about its past and present experiences in order to derive whatever lessons we can take from that, or most often nowadays to offer some kind of assistance to a suffering spirit, as shown in the image that I had on the screen earlier, and oftentimes to provide the consequential assistance to incarnate beings who they are somehow connected to in emotionally and spiritually unhealthy ways. So while we cannot deny that just as there are loving and positive communications, there are also those inspired by bitterness, suffering, hatred, and maliciousness. But if you ask whether we should forbid all communications, the answer is no. And first of all, for some mediums, the communications or perceptions are strong and will occur despite any attempts to hinder them, because they are very natural. And likewise, there are mediums completely unaware of their interaction with discarnate spirits who nonetheless experience the effect of such interactions on their physical and mental state. And the education on mediumship and how it works could really benefit them. Others may experience fear from a vague awareness or suspicion without source for explanation. But in addition to all of that, the practice of mediumship, the actual employment of mediumship, when exercised intelligently and with charitable intentions, represents a way in which the beings from two dimensions of life can collaborate in a loving work that benefits both realms. So, number 3 here, the best approach to mediumship is with the proper education, which will allow for the charitable collaboration between the two realms, the ease of suffering and fulfillment of responsibilities assumed by spirits of both worlds, and the progression of our knowledge regarding the eternal life of the spirit, while at the same time protecting us from the dangers of a negative influence. So we've covered the questions of danger here so far in terms of the most serious potential circumstances. But what about the potential for being duped? What about fraud? Well, there are fraudulent practitioners in all different fields of work. So we got to be rational here and understand that just as there are deceptive people in all walks of life and all kinds of activities, they're at play in the practice of mediumship as well. Some frauds are not mediums at all and seek only to put on a show or to make a dollar at someone else's expense. Others may actually be mediums. In other words, they may have an ostensive mediumistic faculty, but they may use their abilities inappropriately or mix truth with untruth out of self-interest. And guess what? Deceit can originate from both the incarnate mediums and from the communicating discarnate spirits. Oh yeah, even the faculty of mediumship when it's legitimate. If a medium is not careful, then he or she can be deceived by a dishonest spirit. But because so many people are unaware of the reality of spirit phenomena and even of the existence of the spirits themselves, then the presence and expose of fraud among the true mediums, right? So we have fraudulent mediums among true and honest mediums, but the expose of the fraud leads people to discard the authenticity of any spirit phenomena and or any communication with spirits. Well, what I will say is that the evidence is there for those who are genuinely interested and willing to look and research. And the very existence of fraud from both realms serves to illustrate the importance of education when it comes to the practice of mediumship. And fortunately, we learn from resources like Kardec's The Medium's book and others how to distinguish the varying nature of spirits according to their language, knowledge, and behavior. Spiritism teaches that we should always hold spirit communications to the tests of rationality, integrity, compatibility with natural laws, as well as to the highest of moral standards. We also learn how to engage in mediumship safely, aided by the protection of noble spirits who collaborate with us in an effort to bring enlightenment, compassion, and help where it's needed. This is the vision of mediumship in Spiritism and the way that it's practiced accordingly. One aspect of mediumship, which can, of course, by no means be the only factor considered when evaluating authenticity, but which in part does help lend credibility to the medium's interests and intentions, is the fact that mediums do not receive financial compensation for the time and effort they dedicate to helping others through their mediumship. It's a volunteer effort, a labor of love. It's a form of charitable service. And this means, for example, that those who benefit from the medium-based forms of assistance at a Spiritist center will not be asked to pay for this help. Incidentally, in a similar fashion, Spiritist groups frequently offer additional forms of strictly volunteer-based social and community service. And there's generally no paid positions within the ranks of workers at a Spiritist center, including the roles involved in the management of the center as well as the public speakers. Most typically, it will also include the many individuals who perform the all-important tasks needed to maintain the facility and assure that the meetings and other services run smoothly. But no, in Spiritism, mediumship is not seen as a professional service or commercialized for any reason. Now, as I mentioned before, the Spiritist practice of mediumship is a labor of love and service. However, you may also recall when I stated that the proper education of mediumship will allow, in part, for the fulfillment of responsibilities assumed by both spirits of both worlds, meaning physical and spiritual. The circumstances of our lives are never without reason, and above all, they provide for our moral and intellectual growth. Life, therefore, affords different experiences and opportunities to learn, to correct mistakes along the way, and to develop both knowledge and virtue. So whether it be an opportunity to demonstrate an acquired moral quality, or to redeem oneself from unfortunate choices in one's past, the faculty of mediumship represents responsibility, not a badge of inherent honor or superiority. I'm going to share with you now an excerpt from Allan Kardec's published work, The Medium's Book. And this excerpt is from a two-part question and answer, specifically number 226. The first question asks, does the development of mediumship have any relation to the medium's moral development? The answer from the spirits was, no. Strictly speaking, the mediumistic faculty depends on the organism and is independent of the moral nature. This, however, is not the case as regards the use made of mediumship, which may be good or bad, according to the moral qualities of the medium. And in the second question, or second part of this question, number 226, the spirits were asked, it has always been asserted that mediumship is a gift from God, a grace, a divine favor. Then why isn't it a privilege of moral individuals only? And why are there unworthy persons who are endowed with it to the highest degree, but who do not make good use of it? So the spirits answered, all our faculties are favors for which we should thank God, for there are some persons who do not possess them. You could just as well ask why God has given good eyesight to criminals, dexterity to thieves, or eloquence to those who use it only for evil. The same applies to mediumship. Unworthy individuals have been endowed with it because they need it more than others, and in order to better themselves. Do you think that God refuses the means of salvation to the guilty? Instead, he multiplies such means at every step by placing them right in their hands. It is their responsibility to take advantage of them, however. So from Spiritism, we learn that individuals of all different levels are endowed with mediumship, even those who may have the tendency to use it for malevolent purposes. The faculty is granted as an opportunity for them to better themselves by using it in benefit of others. It is then by their own free will that they take advantage of such a gift or not. I'm going to close tonight with a quote from a Spiritist book entitled Guidelines for Safety, a dialogue regarding the multiple aspects of mediumship. And this book is a series of questions concerning mediumship with answers from two admirable Spiritist mediums, Divaldo Franco and Raul Teixeira. I highly recommend it for those interested in learning about mediumship, and most particularly in the Spiritist vision and practice. This particular question was answered by Divaldo, and it reads, what is the purpose of mediumship on earth? Divaldo explained, mediumship, first and foremost, is an opportunity of service. It's a blessing from God, which allows us to have contact with the spiritual life. It is thanks to this interchange that we are able, while here, to be certain not only of survival after death, but also to have the necessary equilibrium to efficiently settle debts acquired in our previous incarnations. It is thanks to mediumship that man is able to preview his spiritual future, and at the same time to receive reports from those who have preceded him in the journey back to erraticity. They bring men trustworthy reports, directives for equilibrium, and the opportunity to redraw pathways using the lessons absorbed in the contact established with the discarnate entities. Therefore, mediumship has a very important objective. Through it, man becomes conscious of his responsibilities as an immortal spirit. That's it for tonight. I thank you, as always, so much for joining. Any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can send them to Kardec Radio or to me at Explore Spiritism. I wish you and your loved ones a great next couple of weeks, and I'll see you next time. Good night, and God bless.